All right, guys, thank you so much for staying with us. We are back in Elevate Paso, and I'm very thrilled about this episode. I am sitting next to the former First Lady of El Paso, Miss Adair Margo. How are you, ma'am?
I'm fine, thank you. It's so nice to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
And it's a pleasure to have you. I'm very thrilled about our conversation. We're going to be speaking about some events that are coming up that I believe are of great importance and all of us need to be aware of. Before we get to that, though, can you tell us a little bit about some of your involvement with Juarez? I know you have some tours that you could go back and forth, and that's a project you started. Tell me about this.
Well, I got my master's degree up at New Mexico State and ended up at the suggestion of an Italian, of all people, a friend who knew about the Franciscans in New Mexico, that I do my master's thesis on Franciscan mission architecture in New Mexico. And I discovered a prime example is the mission of Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe in Juarez. 1659, it dates from then. So that was kind of the beginning of my falling in love with Juarez and getting to know the first building in the entire Paso of the North. And since that time, I was involved with Guadalupe de la Vega and women's health care and many issues. But when I was First Lady, I started First Lady Tours. That was kind of I had done tours when I had an art gallery for 25 years downtown. I'd always take people to Juarez, but when I turned it into First Lady, it got a little bit more attention, not just private attention, but public attention. And since I'm not First Lady anymore, I've continued them, and we do it through the Tom Lea Institute, or sometimes just when people come. It's a shame to come to the border and never cross to Juarez because they enrich our history. We don't discover the first building that takes us back more than 100 years before the United States was born. So I'm still very passionate about that.
And it's a great project, and it ties us. It has that bond as sister cities that we are. And I believe that what we're about to have coming up in September is another great step towards that. Can you tell us about this?
Right. Well, that, as we know where we live, the river changed the course, flooding changed the course of the Rio Grande, which was the natural boundary between the U.S. and Mexico. That's why we had our Chamizal Treaty back in 1964, where both sides were dedicated to arts and culture in parks by National Park. Juarez honored our president, Abraham Lincoln, who Mexicans have always admired Abraham Lincoln, as do our people. The United States never reciprocated by honoring the great president of Mexico and Abraham Lincoln's contemporary, Benito Juarez, who was a 4'6" Zapotec Indian. Abraham Lincoln was 6'4".
That's right.
But they're just both admirable people. Both came up from poverty, both educated, and became great presidents. So El Paso, through the 12 travelers through the Paso of the North, they're the ones who put the equestrian monument.
Right.
It's about the coming of the horse in 1598. They put Fray Garcia de San Francisco just a few blocks from here, and that was their first one. He built the mission in Juarez, 1659 it was founded. They did Susan McGoffin, which is off Donovan Street in Keystone Park.
Right.
And then this will be the fourth, which will be a national, it's really an international project because it's going to be placed at the Chamizal. And it shows, the monument is done, John Hauser's son has worked with him on all his projects, Ethan Taliesin Hauser. His father passed away. So he has taken a concept that began with his uncle, who's a historian, who's worked with the Tequis forever. His name's Nick Hauser. He's done all the research. But his dad had started with a maquette, and he's completing it. But it shows Benito Juarez as a young Zapotec Indian boy with his sheep sitting on a bench. And he's holding a book. And seated next to him is Benito Juarez, the future president of Mexico, who lived at Paso del Norte When the French intervened in 1865, he lived for 11 months in what was then Paso del Norte. And so it shows these two figures, as a boy and as a man. That's never been done before. And Ethan Hauser is completing it. It'll be 1.5 inch, 1.5 life size. And so we'll dedicate it on the 25th of September at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to unveil it, and the public will be invited to that.
And this is at the Chamizal,
This is
the El Paso side.
This is on the El Paso, the Chamizal Museum.
And this is important because not just was Benito Juarez somebody who was a contemporary of Lincoln, but he was somebody who changed the history of Mexico and was able to bring up the culture out there, bring up the people in regards to education and a more democratic system.
He was a constitutional president. And another interesting thing, because I founded the Tom Lea Institute, Tom Lea was another giant in our community who never painted portraits generally unless people could sit for him. And he did it as gifts. But he did a portrait of Benito Juarez in 1947 after Harry Truman traveled down to Mexico City and laid a wreath on the tomb of the Niños Héroes.
Right.
And the Pan American Round Table, which is coming for the second Benito Juarez dedication on September 25th, they commissioned Tom Lea to do a portrait of Benito Juarez that was sent to Blair House in Washington because that's where Truman lived. They were remodeling the White House. It's now in the State Department. We just recently, it's so an El Pasoan who did a portrait of Benito Juarez, and then of course after Benito Juarez lived at Paso del Norte, he was always invited to come over to Fort Bliss to participate in parties on this side, hospitality shown to him, but he wouldn't leave his country while it was being occupied by a foreign power. So he never crossed. But afterwards, then in 1881, I believe it was, when they renamed Ciudad Juarez, named Paso del Norte Ciudad Juarez.
Right, and this is again something that is going to be historical. I mean, this is several hundred years later, and we're now catching up to this. So it's a great event. I look forward to being part of this as well, being out there and showing you guys as well. Can you tell me in regards to what else is next in regards to your projects? You're doing the tours. Are you going to be featuring any of the El Paso downtown?
Yes, we do. The Tom Lea Institute does several tours. They do Seeing the World Through Our Architecture with Edgar Lopez, who is an architect. So you see details of Spanish colonial art and Moroccan art. All these influences you can see when you look up at our buildings here in El Paso. They do that one. We've just done one with Fred Morales on the Mexican Revolution, going to visit Mexican Revolution sites. We do one just a walking downtown tour. So we do a variety of them, and then I'll do them just when people come to town and want to be shown around. I enjoy doing it.
I'm sorry, what organization was this?
Pardon?
What organization was it?
The Tom Lea Institute. Many of these murals tours have been done with them, and also in coordination with Celebration of Our Mountains. Because our mountains, of course, to Tom Lea, the mountain was a mainstay in his life. He wrote about Mount Franklin. And so with combining Celebration of Our Mountains with the Tom Lea Institute, you can experience geologic tours or dealing with our environment, our extraordinary Chihuahuan desert landscape, and then cultural things, man-made things that we can enjoy here in paintings and murals and things like that. We also do a segundo barrio. tour.
And speaking of the murals, we now have some of the mural artists coming up and doing art at the new West Tower building.
The West Star Tower, El Paso is very fortunate to have very philanthropic people. Paul Foster, one who's restored so many of our buildings, and Woody the Hunts, that was a company that started in the Lower Valley as like a hardware store, providing materials. Gaspar Enriquez, in fact, who just completed a portrait for the 19th floor of West Star Tower of the family history. Yeah. He remembered buying things from Hunt Sales.
Oh wow!
When he was growing up, when they were located on Texas Street. But many of them, since the Hunts, as they have grown into this international company, they have invested in so many organizations in El Paso, from small not-for-profits to the new medical school, which Paul Foster funded so we could have medical education here. But they also, in their art collection, they have people representing our 3 states, Chihuahua, New Mexico, and Texas. And then in this new phase where we've added art for West Star Tower, many of the artists have done murals or projects or living. In fact, some of them are living in the artist lofts right across the street.
Oh, wow.
I've always wondered about how do you get clients to come, not just artists, but people who will buy art. And some of them, Andrew Joseph Perez, who designed this Paso del Norte Loteria. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yes.
It's awesome. His girlfriend did the paintings, designed all the cards where instead of, we've got our own people. We've got Jerry Rubin, with Helen of Troy as a salesman, and the Bear, our basketball coach, and Rosa Guerrero, and all kinds of luchadors. But for that building, in fact, in the community room, I saw that game and loved it, and I said, Andrew and Sochi, could you all turn that into a work of art? So literally on the 19th floor, you have 60 Loteria cards in wood on an entire wall. And then the design on the back, which is a radial design that Andrew had done, just a flat design, but he turned that into a 3-dimensional work of art that will knock your socks off. About the history of El Paso in one design, where each one of the radials from the river and old Indian trails, and then you've got inlaid acrylic pieces of Indian symbols, arrowheads, and then you have the Camino Real. Of course, a lot of that followed old Indian trails, and then all the symbols of the church and the crown, the Spanish crown. And then you have the overland stagecoach, and then you have kind of this Western history, and then you have the railroad. And the building of our city. It's just an awesome work of art. And what I've learned, because he spent 2 years on it, 1,200 inlaid pieces in this one work of art with light. It's just extraordinary. It's like the high Renaissance of El Paso, describing our history because it's so big. How do you get it up?
Yeah, and this is at the 19th floor at the West Star Tower.
The West Star Tower. Tom Lea did Giants of our history. It's the finest mural of the New Deal period that dates from 1938. But when you have that classic style, you run out of room.
Yeah.
You can't have giants that ring around the city 10 times. But Andrew's come up with this design that communicates it in just a beautiful way. So I'm very excited about that. It's on 3 floors, and we're going to have some tours of those 3 floors of the art collection of the Hunts. They want to share it with other people.
That's exciting, and that's the kind of stuff that excites me about having these conversations with you. There's so much that we could learn from in regards to the history, the art, and all the culture in general. I'm very much looking forward to continuing these talks and staying in touch with you.
Good.
Before we let you go, is there anything you want to tell the audience?
Well, we live in a very rich place. It's a nourishing place, but it hasn't, most people don't know it. They haven't recognized it. And so sometimes we think we're lacking because no one else is talking about us. But what's so awesome, someone like Tom Lea chose to stay here because his own nourishment was here. Someone like Andrew Joseph Pettis has chosen to stay here because his nourishment was here. And then we're going to have all these awesome, and we have it around our city in our murals downtown, communicating where we are. I mean, Sini Alvarado's been in the New York Times, and I mean, we've gotten lots of publicity based on our murals, many of them students of Gaspar Enriquez's, who taught at Bowie High School. So what I think we're going to see is a place where people realize they can come home, produce, create, and if you're entrepreneurial at this time, no one may hire you, but you can create something that really, and more with time, more and more people will be hiring too, as El Paso experiences a renaissance, which means rebirth.
That's right, and thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. Once again, look forward to continuing these talks. It's been an awesome experience.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Stick with us, guys.